Hi everyone, and happy Monday, and welcome back to the Pig Trail Nation studio.
I feel like we've been all along. You're the one that's been gone.
I'm happy to be back though. Tampa was a good time. Hogs won, made it all worth it. It was a good time in Tampa, but we are back here. It is Monday, and of course we are doing our Ask Mike segment as usual. Mike, are we mostly talking football?
Almost exclusively.
Okay.
Just a little bit of basketball because the news is not very good. So let's concentrate on good news, and so that Ask Mike this week won't be negative.
Okay, I like that. All right, let's start with our first question from Eddie Lynn this week, who wants to know, have we ever had a better football staff at making halftime adjustments than this one? I am so thankful to have a real head coach with smart assistants running our football program.
You know, I tried to do a little research on this, but come on, I'm not going to go all the way back to Frank Broyles' staff. Let's just compare this staff in adjustments to the previous two, because that's where you had problems. I mean, think about Bielema's last two teams where they'd go in halftime and have the big lead, and then they'd blow it. And then with Chad Morris, I don't know that they adjusted before the game, at halftime, after the game, whatever. But this staff is really good. I did look at some numbers. In the second half, Arkansas outscored its opponents 222 to 159. But the games that stood out when I looked, Rice, Georgia Southern, LSU, Missouri, and Penn State, and especially Penn State, if we look at the adjustments, they were on both sides of the ball. If you'll remember, their quarterback looked pretty good.
He did look good.
And they had some receivers that could get open and catch the ball. What Arkansas did in the second half, and I give Barry Odom a lot of credit, for a guy that had been three-man pass rush most of the year, he really changed toward the end. And I mean, they were coming after that quarterback, and they knocked him out of the game late. He was just all beat up, and James Franklin pulled him. So that was a great halftime adjustment by Barry Odom. And then Kendall Briles, you know, they go in at halftime, and I give Penn State a lot of credit. They had a good game plan. They had KJ pretty much confused. I don't know what was going on technically because I wasn't there and didn't have a chance to ask, but he looked like he was lost when he was trying to throw the ball. They stopped the running game pretty much. KJ did a few things himself that were pretty good on one or two of those drives. He had the one pick, but wasn't his fault. Right. You know, so
I think that was Warren Thompson in the end zone. You got to go to the ball.
He didn't come back to the ball. So, you know, I just felt like that Penn State did a really good job of kind of knowing that Arkansas didn't have Traylon Burks and trying to take advantage of that, and then figuring, okay, they're going to run the ball more, which they did. The thing that shocked me was the depth they must have on defense, because they were without 5 of their best tacklers, and they were just hammering Arkansas' running game. So then you go in at halftime, they make all these adjustments, and then they just come out running the ball left, running it right, going here, going there, and didn't throw it that much. And James Franklin, I think we've got a quote, if we bring it up. He's talking about the adjustments here, and he said in the second half they made an adjustment and made a commitment to run the quarterback, and that was obviously a major factor in the game. So, yeah, halftime adjustments were good all year, especially in this game, and man, do the fans feel better about this coaching staff.
Yes.
It's almost like you went from an alternate universe Razorback football team back to the team we were kind of used to for so many years. And even better than that, I mean, golly, from going for 2-10, this is the first full regular season that Pittman and his staff have had. And to go 9-4 as opposed to 2-10.
Incredible.
Because last year kind of doesn't count. It was an all SEC schedule. It was tough. Played the toughest SEC.
You still had a good season.
And they were okay. They could have won 5 or 6 games last year. But this year, when you get that full non-conference slate and you're not playing quite the tough SEC schedule that you were last year, boom, you know, 9 wins. That's pretty amazing.
And now you just kind of hope that they can hold on to the guys on this staff. So we'll wait and see
those guys
what
and
happens.
Maybe get some people to come back.
Yeah, exactly. That would be nice.
They're losing some, but.
All right. Well, referring to the Outback Bowl MVP, KJ Jefferson, Richard Grant says, need to strap that thing onto KJ's back. He carried the rest of the offense during the game.
Boy, he sure did.
He really did.
We've really, even though the perception is he didn't play very well in the first half, he actually did some good things.
I think so too.
And then he comes back in the second half, and his ability to adjust, that's the thing. that nobody knew about him as a quarterback was his ability to get with Kendall Briles at halftime and, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to change this up. And the second half that he had was amazing. And then the effort. And then he eventually kind of got knocked out himself right toward the end.
Oh.
If you remember that one play where he went flying through the air, and I think Pittman was asked about that at the end, and he said, "We don't do no sliding around.
Yeah.
That's not what we do."
But,
so that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But KJ just was amazing in this game.
Oh.
He really was, and just the biggest surprise this year. I got to tell you,
Yeah.
he just figured out a way to help this team win almost every game that they won. And even some that they lost would have been a blowout if he didn't do what he did, like the Ole Miss game.
I got to say, I think one of my favorite sound bites from Sam Pittman after that game was actually talking about KJ Jefferson and why he was always running it up the middle and stuff. And he's like, earlier in the season, I told KJ, you can run to the left, you can run to the right. He said, KJ said, no, he doesn't do that. He wants to make a statement. So I think he definitely does. All right, let's move on. We've got Roger Ballard who says, 4-0 in trophy games. Woo pig suey.
Yeah, that's a
nice stat.
I never really thought much about trophy games.
But now you like them.
Well, you had 4 of them in one year. I mean, honestly, they may have better seasons in the future. They may hopefully win 10 games, 11, whatever. But I don't know that you're going to win all 4, get 4 trophies in one year, win all of those regular season trophies, and then get a bowl trophy.
It's pretty incredible.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I wasn't there, but I thought I heard somewhere or maybe read on Twitter that Pittman said before they left, they had a picture taken with all of those bowl trophies, and they left a space in there so they could Photoshop the Outback Bowl trophy in there.
Yeah.
So now they've got all of them with the whole team, and that's pretty cool. And,
I love
look,
that.
What he said is that's going to be on display in the lobby.
It should be.
So fans can come in there and look at that.
It's funny. I don't know why this is part of the tradition, but they always just plop them right in the center of the football complex in the floor. They don't put them in the trophy case at first. They just
come in
dead center of the floor.
That's all you need to know is to look at those 4 trophies.
Right. All right. Well, referring to the fancy stuff that just wasn't working against Penn State, like some of the double passes and Penn State's defense, let's go to Razor, who says, down their throat on 2 drives, and then Briles wants to get cute and run 2 plays literally again. Does he just want credit for being a cutesy offensive genius or something?
Well, this was going on in the first half. People were going crazy on it on social media. And it was mainly because the success they were having, they were kind of going right at him. And then he was doing a lot of stuff that we always talk about him doing. He likes to probe the edges. He does early in games. And see, and some games it works.
It works.
They had some success in the second half doing that. But I think what they were mainly complaining about was a lot of this reverses, and the guy goes by KJ and then turns around and loops behind him, and then KJ takes it and throws it to a guy. And then there's 2 separate issues to me. The double reverses, which almost never seem to work. And then either a running back or a receiver turns into a passer.
Throwing the ball.
Which doesn't seem to work. Now look, a guy asked me on Twitter, is he ever going to give this up? I don't think he has to give it up if he will make it work. That's the solution, because trick plays can be fun. Fancy, weird stuff can be fun if it works. So to me, for instance, on the double reverses, in the off season, just get the guys out there that might be involved in that and have them do it all the time. You can even do it in the off season winter program. Just get in the indoor and have them lateral the ball around to each other and hand off or lateral or whatever they're doing, and just get that down and keep doing it all the way through into the season. And the other thing is, if you're going to have your receivers or your running backs throw passes, figure out which one can actually sort of do it. And then take those guys and have them throw it a lot in the off season, in the spring, in the summer, even next fall. So develop these things that you're going to do and make it where it's just, second nature
to those guys.
And so rather than say give it up, I would say just get better at it.
I mean, hey, we saw the one with Reed Bauer and
exactly. Scott Fountain, nobody's complaining about his fancy stuff.
It was great. So we'll see.
Just make it work.
All right, Penn State also had a problem with getting cute a little bit as well.
Did.
You remember that embarrassing trick play late in the first half in the backfield. But Hog Wild in Tennessee calls it the worst fake punt in college football history.
Well,
that's a statement right there.
That's a little bit of an exaggeration. I've seen some that are worse, but here's what made that a little bit weird. Okay, it's toward the end of the half. I think there's under 2 minutes to go. They're down. You think they're going to at least kick a field goal, and honestly, they were close enough to do the attempt, but now they're going to punt. So that's almost a little bit of a giveaway right there.
Yeah.
Then what they do is they line up like 4 or 5 receivers on one side. There's nobody on the other side. But then right before the snap, they bring this tight end across in front of the punter. Now here's the part where it's just cheesy. As after he crosses in front of the punter, he turns around, he's going like, throw it to me, throw it to me. Well, nobody's going to do that. It was too obvious. What they were trying to do clearly was to get the defense to look at that guy over here and go, oh, he wants the ball. So everybody's looking there. They got these other 4 guys out to run in behind here. Well, everybody's thinking it's going to be this guy over here on the right side. And then, boom, somebody's bound to be open, maybe even in the end zone behind them. What blew that play up was they didn't block somebody because the punter almost got sacked.
Yeah.
And as he moved to his right, and I think what he was going to do is move to his right, like he's going to throw the ball to that tight end and then turn and just lob it to somebody over there. They got 4 receivers over there that's going to be in the end zone. Just lob it up to whoever's open. But when he turned to do that, the guy's right in his face. So he just throws a mortar shot off his back foot. It goes up, and Joe Fouché catches it. Could have had an interception to go along with the others that he had, but wisely dropped it because the ball comes out to the 33. So. I'm not saying it was a stupid trick play. The one part of it was with the cheesy, throw it to me, throw it to me. But it might have worked if they hadn't pressured the punter. Because, I mean, that's too much to ask of a punter to throw the ball when somebody's right in his face.
Yeah, it just wasn't well executed on several levels. All right, Alex Forhogs, 88, asks, I'm curious to know your opinion of James Franklin as a coach and a person. He does seem like a real stand-up guy in his press conferences, and obviously a great coach doing well at Vandy and Penn State. So, what do you think of him?
Well, you guys were out there around him. I wasn't around him in press conferences, but I've always liked this guy. What I liked about him was there's nobody that had a bigger excuse or a bigger reason to come up with a COVID excuse. Now, why do I say COVID excuses? Because I'm suspicious. I've always believed since last year it's too easy to say, oh, we have COVID. I can't prove that A&M did what they did just because they didn't want to play. But I've said before, I think I said it on the show last week, I think they thought they were better than the bowl that they were in. They wanted to be in a New Year's Day bowl. And they just, okay, we've got COVID issues. Now, maybe they didn't do it. Maybe they did have COVID issues. But here's what happened that I do know. They mass tested, and that wasn't supposed to be the protocol. Remember, when the season started, SEC said there will be no testing of asymptomatic players. Okay, you got 3 players over here that are showing symptoms, and you test them, and they test positive, they're out. But you're not going to go then and test everybody. You're not even going to contact trace. The only time you're going to test is if a player shows symptoms. Well, they didn't follow that. So, to me, Franklin could have come back under any circumstance and said, we just don't have enough.
Yeah, he could have.
But he didn't. Nobody was hitting any worse than he was. 6 starters, not 6 players.
That's a lot.
6 starters. 5 on defense. And look at the way the defense played. They came out there, were aggressive. I mean, remember last year when Arkansas was down like 3 or 4 defensive linemen, LSU just ran all over them? Well, that didn't happen in this game first half. Now, I do think what happened was they had a lack of depth, and it wore them down in
Arkansas,
the second. I think Penn State had a lack of depth on defense in the second half, and they got tired, and it kind of, you got a bunch of guys out there playing that haven't started before. So they get into the third quarter, and they just looked like they didn't have it, like they were out of gas. But I give them credit for playing hard.
They did.
I give him credit for not making excuses and just manning up and saying, we're going to play. And I like that guy, and I'm going to like him even more after this bowl game because you compare him to what some of these other coaches did, come on.
And that's why I just base this off of listening to Sam Pittman talk about Coach Franklin. And he mentioned at the end of the game, you know, why take a knee? why not just try to run up the score? And he said you have to have respect for your opponent, and because Coach Franklin and Penn State chose to play this game,
exactly,
you have respect for them. So I think what he's kind of hinting at is they obviously could. They could have just said, we're not playing this game. So seems like a really stand-up guy. I'll agree with Alex Forhog's 88 as well.
I like him.
All right. Hud Wyndham on Facebook asks, what's going on with all these SEC teams losing bowl games? Texas Tech was 6-6 and jumped all over a pretty good Mississippi State team. Those guys looked like they were asleep.
Well, that's the contrast. Mississippi State, with a similar situation to Penn State, they had 6 guys out, 3 on offense, 3 on defense. I'm saying 6 starters. And their defense looked pitiful. And they've been one of the best run-stop teams in the SEC. And Texas Tech, which has kind of an average running game, just blew right by them, ended up blowing them out. I think it's very difficult to play a bowl game under those circumstances. I do think what happened with Mississippi State is they were overconfident. Because I think they thought, oh, we're playing these guys. It won't matter what happens. There was nothing about Texas Tech to suggest they were going to play like that.
No.
Now, I've got friends in Lubbock. I've said this many times. I grew up there, the Texas Tech fans. And I watch them. I like to see them win as long as they're not playing Arkansas. But I was mad at them because why didn't they play like that the rest of the year? Why do you get into a bowl game and suddenly get all aggressive and you're doing this and you're doing that, but you're playing these stupid lose to Kansas State for no reason and all that stuff? They got their head coach fired by being inconsistent. And then you come back at the end of the year and look like Superman. So, again, I have respect for Mike Leach and James Franklin because they played the game when they could have said, oh, we don't have enough. We've got COVID issues. And they didn't do that, either one of them.
You think some of the other SEC teams are just kind of experiencing the same thing?
I think, you'd have to be inside the coaching staff of all those teams that canceled bowl games to know, Hawaii and some of the others. But to me, I think, here's what I think. Everybody knows that coaches go to bowl games, these lesser bowl games. They accept bids because you get an extra workout period. It's like an extra spring training. Just call it winter training.
You get more weeks to work with your team.
They take that video of all those practices. Coaches don't have that much to do in the off season because they can't work with the players. So you just sit in the room and look at all these practices over and over again. Helps you have a better game plan for the spring. So they want to do that. But it's like, okay, we're going to go through all these bowl workouts, and then we're going to suddenly have COVID issues, and we can't play. And again, I can't prove any of this. It's just, I'm suspicious, I guess.
Yeah, because, I mean, the players want to play.
You would think they would,
You would think so. So, all right. Well, let's move on. Hog wants to know, with all the players opting out of bowl games they consider unimportant, do you think a 16-team playoff scenario will be accelerated to keep more players engaged?
Well, first of all, before we start talking 16, let's go to 8 or 12.
Yeah, it's like 16 is a big jump.
They haven't even done that yet. They're still arguing about it. But yes, I do think that would be one of the issues to try and push this through is if you involve more teams, you're going to have fewer opt-outs. So I would consider that a side issue, a side reason for doing it. But the truth is, you need to expand the playoffs because that's what you do in every other sport. It drives me nuts for these, and Nick Saban even did it. He just said, well, if we're having blowouts like we got it now, it's going to be even worse. Well, maybe it will be worse. But are you telling me that in the 7A West, or I'm sorry, 7A conference in Arkansas, the AAA is going to step in and say, no, we're not going to have 4 teams from each conference compete in a playoff. Let's just pick 2 teams and have them play for the whole thing. No, you don't do that. And to me, it's arrogant to assume that all these teams are going to get blown out.
Right.
You're going to have blowouts. You have blowouts the way
all
it is
the time.
now. But you can't tell me that if we expand the college football playoffs that you're never going to have a thing like we had in baseball this year where a North Carolina State comes out of nowhere at the end and suddenly gets hot. And the only reason they didn't win the national championship is they got COVID issues. That's the only reason. They were the best team in college baseball at the end of the year, probably the only team that could have beaten Arkansas. And that kind of thing, to me, is why you have the playoffs. It's what makes the NCAA basketball tournament good. Why do people think that there's something about football? I've read all this garbage. Oh, it's a more physical sport, and therefore you can only have a few teams, and it's boring to have the rest of it. What is this boring stuff? If it's boring, don't watch it.
Well, it's just like, the argument that there's too many bowl games. I love all the bowl games. In fact, I wish I got to watch
it. On the next question.
Okay, perfect. Let's get to it then. Pig's Feet says, adding to what Hob Hog asked, are bowl games, as we know them, going to end? Some of these games have been unbearable to watch due to teams losing players, coaches to opt-outs. Seems like 8 or 16 teams would create a greater distance between the haves and have-nots.
And that might happen.
Maybe.
If you go to a 12-team playoff, I don't know about 16, people keep talking about that. That's pretty ambitious for right now. But if you go to a 12-team playoff or 8 or whatever, maybe it further distances those teams from everybody else. But they're never, in my opinion, going to stop bowl games, and here's why. Number one, I've already mentioned it, coaches like that extra time to work.
Yeah.
But if you as a fan don't want to watch these bowl games, has somebody got a gun to your head and making you do it? Just don't watch it. Those bowl games, those lower tier bowl games are for what? They're for the fans of those teams, and they're for the players on those teams.
Exactly.
When I was a senior in high school, back in those days in Texas, we have districts instead of conferences, but you had to win your district to get into the playoffs. It's not true anymore. So we finished second my senior year. And so we couldn't play in the playoffs. Now, if somebody had come in and told all of us on that team, hey, you guys can't go to the playoffs, but we're going to take the second place team from this other district next to yours, and you two are going to play an extra game at the end of the year, we would have all said, yeah, we'll play it.
Yeah.
Now, maybe the fans wouldn't have been excited, but I know that as a player, I hated workouts. I knew they were necessary, but they were the most boring, drudgery things there were. Why did you do it? Because you loved the games. I loved coming out of that field house and then playing the fight song as you went out on the field, and you could see all those people from your hometown. You grew up, they were adults when you were a kid, they're still in the stands when you're in high school, and you're playing for your hometown. And you're having fun out there. Even when you're getting beat, you're still having, it still beats not playing. So I don't get all of this. It makes it boring. Just don't watch the Ding Dong Bowl if you don't want to watch the Ding Dong Bowl.
You think about, like, okay, so we're talking about Arkansas fans. You want to see one last game with Grant Morgan. You want to see one last game with Hayden Henry, all those guys. And it's the same thing for every other team in their fan base as well. And those guys want one more chance to end the season well. So I completely agree with you.
I don't think bowl games are going away with the expanded playoff.
I don't think so either. All right, Lanny wants to know, is there any hope for our basketball team? These guys don't know how to play defense.
Okay.
Savage, Lanny.
Yeah, it's brutal. Look, I don't know. I've looked at this team and I've asked myself some widely different questions. Like, number one, do we just have a bunch of guys that like offense so much that they don't want to be on defense? So they don't play defense? Maybe. I don't know, maybe. That would indicate a lack of effort. Your heart's not into it. So, because defensively, they seem to break down after about 10 seconds into the shot clock, or at least 10 seconds after the other team gets down on their end of the floor. It takes about 10 seconds to start breaking them down. So is that a boredom factor? I don't want to be playing defense.
I don't know.
Is it or is it a lack of knowledge? I mean, it's occurred to me that Musselman may have gone out and brought in all these grad transfers based on their scoring ability, because almost all of them were kind of the leading scorer on their teams. And then maybe they just didn't play defense the way he wants, but I can't believe he would overlook that. He's too detailed already.
Exactly.
So I don't think that's the answer. And then I've considered maybe they're just not talented enough on defense. Now, in the Mississippi State game, I saw the guys up top or out on the three-point perimeter, guys like Devo just get beat off the dribble. Like you're standing here and pew, goes around you, and then he splits two guys in the lane and just kind of go, oh, okay, you want to go to the basket, score. To me, that's a lack of effort.
Yeah.
But we've now seen it in 3 out of the last 4 games. So if there's any good news, this team is still unbeaten at home. So maybe we're talking about an issue where they go out on the road and he just has to figure out how to get them more focused away from Bud Walton. The only good thing in the Mississippi State game was they started hitting threes.
Yeah.
They did. I mean, they were that's what kept them in the game for a while. They were in the second half mostly down 10 points, but you know, they got down 16 at one point and got it back, I think, to around 10 at one point, and it was because of their three-point shooting.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they're starting to figure the offense part of it out, but you just got to ask yourself, the previous 2 seasons, Musselman and his staff have figured out what's wrong. Mm-hmm. Are they still going to do it? I don't know.
That's kind of what I was going to bring up. I think it's still too early to start panicking about this team. Like, you look back at the schedule that they had last year, they lost several early SEC games. And then they went to the Elite Eight. So, like, don't press the panic button just yet, everyone.
I'm wrong about a lot of stuff. Freely admit I'm wrong because I don't have ESP. If you ask me right now, I would say no. This team just doesn't have it.
No, to make it to the Elite Eight.
I'm worried they're not even going to make the tournament. If they don't turn around their defense from what we're seeing right now, there is some really good teams in the SEC this year. LSU, Auburn, Alabama, even Mississippi State, who I think is a middle-of-the-pack SEC team, made Arkansas look bad.
Yeah.
So if they don't turn around the defensive part, they're not going to the tournament. So he and Muss and his staff have a lot of work to do, and it starts Tuesday night against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, that's going to be a good time. All right, back to football, though, Mike. So we've got Lake City Hog, who says the season is over and maybe now is the time to ask, is Kendall Briles leaving? I've been hearing rumors of Miami as offensive coordinator for nearly 2 weeks. Wouldn't this be a lateral move at best, though?
I mean, lateral move depends on the person involved.
Right.
You know, Kendall Briles was at Florida State. Maybe he likes it down there.
Maybe.
We don't know. Here's the problem with anything like that. One of these things that Sam Pittman got from Kirby Smart is his assistant coaches don't talk. That's the one thing I would say about him that I do not like, because we can't talk to Kendall Briles. All these questions people have been criticizing him for and all this stuff. We're never able to. I would like to ask Kendall Briles about Jefferson and the way that worked.
The development of him?
Yes, but we can't, because during the season we can't talk to him about this. You were down in Florida. I mean, it's a simple trip over from Miami across Florida if somebody on that staff wanted to talk to him. So I don't know if they came over and made a little visit or whatever. I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah.
As far as I know, they have not added a new offensive coordinator at Miami. We've heard no news, so no news is good news, right? And I'm assuming, based on what both Sam Pittman said about his agent and what Hunter Yurachek said about the assistants, I'm assuming that Kendall Briles is going to get a pretty good raise, sort of like what Odom got last year, in order to entice him to stick around. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he's going to stay here until he gets a head coaching job.
I'd actually agree with that. I mean, Pittman said that he doesn't want to lose any of his coaches because they're not paying them well enough.
Right.
If they leave, it's because it's a better job or a different job that they want. It's closer to home, something like that. So money won't be the issue with Kendall Briles. All right, Chi-Town Hog asks, what are the coaches saying about Hornsby as far as development? Not too far back there were legit doubts about KJ, and now look where he is. Is Hornsby passing and decision-making improving?
Well, whether or not Hornsby's getting better is just an observation thing that anybody can make. And I would say he's done a pretty good job. He's gotten a chance to play. Remember, he got in the A&M game and had some meaningful possessions where they didn't just, I mean, they lose that game if he totally can't handle it.
Yeah.
So I thought he did a good job in the A&M game. He came in toward the end of the Penn State Outback Bowl game, had that one nice run, did a good job
Almost
of
got
kind
the
of just,
touchdown there.
Yeah, and then did a good job, honestly, of just running out the clock like he was supposed to do. And it does look like, I don't know about his passing, but it does look like he's at least aware of what to do. He didn't do anything dumb like fumble the ball or have bad exchanges or all that. And you've got to throw in the fact that, and this is what I like, I always believe in this, I don't like teams that have to play freshman quarterbacks, even redshirt. If they can get into a mode where a guy does not start until his third year, I think you've got a much better chance of succeeding. So if you look to 2023, that's where Malik Hornsby would be. He'd been in the program now this is his third year, and you got to ask yourself, okay, with what he did this year, is he going to play a little bit more next year? And then he would be totally ready. Is Coley going to come into the mix? Are they going to bring a grad transfer in? All of these things are things we can't know. But here's the problem that I mentioned before. If we could talk to Kendall Briles, we could ask him some of this stuff. Now, maybe, because the rule is different in the offseason, I'm hoping that Sam Pittman will make these assistant coaches available maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and we can sit down with Kendall Briles and ask him about Malik Hornsby, and ask him about Coley, and ask him his thoughts on whether or not they need to bring in another grad transfer guy at some point, or whether or not they've feel like they're going to do all right in the 2023 recruiting class. These are all questions that fans want to know answers to.
But in the world of like the transfer portal and stuff, 3 seasons is a long time to wait for these quarterbacks.
So you have to ask yourself, will Malik even stick around?
Exactly.
I mean, he hasn't said he's leaving.
No, and I don't think he would.
It doesn't look like he's going to, but what happens next year if Coley were to somehow move ahead of him, then he might. Or Coley might leave if it looks like Malik's going to be the starter. So you're always going to have that anyway, and certainly with the portal, with the way it's so much easier to transfer these days.
All right, Pork Soda wants to know, who was your breakout player of the year on offense, defense, and special teams?
Okay, that's really not a very tough question.
I was about to say.
Offense, got to be KJ, right?
Always.
I mean, think about it. Last summer, the dopey SEC media, and I mean that in every sense of the word, and I'm talking about the people that show up at media days, because there's a lot of people that are, if these guys are in the media, they're meatballs. They picked him as either the 13th or 14th best quarterback in the SEC, rated him.
I think it was 14.
Okay, 14th. And look how stupid they end up looking now. First of all, it's dopey to try and predict something like that.
You just never know.
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't. If somebody asked me that, I'd say, "What, are you crazy? How would I know?" So he goes from there, the least respected starting quarterback in the league, to at least the 3rd best, maybe the 2nd, but at least the 3rd best. He just had a remarkable year. So he's your breakout player on offense.
I completely agree with you.
Breakout player on defense was a little more difficult, but I really thought about it, and I said it's got to be Hayden Henry. Because you go back and look at where he was in 2020. He started maybe a game or two. He was mainly a backup guy, and he had 25 tackles. He went up to 100 this year. And what he did by getting himself, what they had in essence was a 3-man starting rotation. It really didn't matter who started. Because 3 guys were going to revolve around those 2 positions. And what having him do what he did, what that enabled the defense to do, or Barry Odom to do, was he could rest each of those 3 more than they were doing before. What does that do? It makes guys like Bumper Pool quicker, fresher, better pass defenders, better getting out on the edge. So I just don't think there's any way that you can downplay the impact that Hayden Henry had on this season.
He did.
I think he might have been the #1 change from one year to the next on defense. So he's my defense. Now, come on, special teams, it's another no-brainer.
Cam Little.
Cam Little. I mean, the guy scored 106 points.
It's just insane.
I mean, I had the numbers there. It's like 25 or 30 points more than Traylon Burks, the #2 guy.
It's wild.
Now, what is 106 points? Well, that's 23 of 27 on field goals or something like that.
20 of 24 on field goals.
20 of 24 on field goals.
46 for 46 on extra points.
So, and that's 106 points. Where does that rank? That ranks 3rd on the all-time list in number of points scored off kicking in a season. Right up there with Alex Tejada, I think. You know, they're just 3rd. So, he's a freshman.
Isn't that wild?
He's going to break that record. He's probably going to break the career record. And, oh, by the way, they lost their kickoff. Calvaruso took off for the portal because he wanted to field goal kick somewhere else. So now, at least in the bowl game, Cam Little kicked off, and I was kind of wondering about that.
How
he kicked the ball into the end zone. So
not bad.
So this guy, those 3 players of the breakout players of the year were like no-brainers.
I tweeted out during the bowl game about Cam Little and how Arkansas can always count on him, and the game wasn't over yet, and someone was like, "Shh, don't jinx him." And so my apologies, but it all worked out. There we go. Let's go with that. All right, we've got one more question for you, Mike. It is from a Razorback Redneck who wants to know, what was it like manning the studio all week while Alyssa and the rest of the PTN crew had fun in Tampa.
You know what? It was very quiet in here.
Oh, yeah?
Except when there were games on. And
Yeah.
I'd be sitting over there by the monitors because we can watch
Yep.
2 games at one time. And you know what I'd be doing? You know what
Yelling
I'd
at
do
the
during
TV?
it? I just yell at the TV because there's nobody in here to get mad anyway.
True.
Why do I yell? I yell at referees all the time.
Yes.
I yell at announcers that are clueless, that don't know how to analyze replays. They're looking at the same replay where everybody else is looking at, and they're coming up with something. You're like, what? Can
Yeah.
you not see what you're seeing? And then the number one reason I yell at the TV is because there's usually a team I don't like playing a game, like Ole Miss.
I was about to say Ole
and
Miss
Baylor.
and Baylor.
Oh, come on. Now, I have a lot of respect for Matt Corral,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that he's not hurt. But come on, watching Lane Kiffin just look like he was going to die at the end of that game when they lose. And I mean, we've already discussed this last week, but I sort of enjoyed Missouri getting beat. That was
Yeah.
fun watching
Drinkwitz.
Dinkiewicz
Yeah.
have his problem. And there were some others that got beat. It was okay. I'm not one of these. I didn't like it at the end of the game when Arkansas fans started that SEC nonsense again.
The SEC chant.
What are you doing that for? Just chant your own team.
Yeah.
What do the SEC do for Arkansas? They give you rotten schedules. They do. They rearrange
That's a
everything
fair
that's right,
point.
and you get screwed over by officials.
Yeah.
You don't hardly ever get mentioned on the SEC network. Arkansas, in my opinion, is the least respected football program. Now, that's changing because of Pittman, but it's not balanced. So I'm not sure what the SEC does for you except for all the turnback money. So we'll take your money, but I'm not going to compliment how awesome you are because I just think it's good that Arkansas be awesome.
And Arkansas is one of the few SEC teams that's actually won their bowl game. So there's that as well. But you held down the fort for everyone here in studio.
Yeah, and there was work to be done.
There was, yeah.
You know, that I couldn't explain in a million years what I had to do, but it was stuff that I hadn't done before with a computer, and I'm not really that computer literate. Like,
it's okay.
Tara can sit here and she just looks at me when she's trying to explain something. I go from there to, what do you mean? Oh, she's like, well, don't you understand?
Yeah.
I'm like, no,
Sorry.
I don't get this. So I was over there, especially putting the Pig Trail show together yesterday, just like my eyeballs were bugging out. And I was glad you guys were back.
You did great. I think we're all happy to be back here in studio, excited to be at the basketball game tomorrow night, that is for sure. And excited to do another Ask Mike with you in studio. We did it a little early last week, so it's nice to be back here on Mondays.
Maybe the basketball news will be better next week.
Hopefully.
Because the football news couldn't go any better.
Yeah. All right, that's going to do it for Ask Mike this week, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next Monday.